Hello, this is Deborah Anderson, the Black Woman Animator, coming back to you with another video. And in this video, I have Lennie Graves. Welcome to the platform.
Hi, Deborah. Thank you.
Can you give a quick introduction about yourself?
I am Lennie Graves. I'm an animator. I started out in 2D animation and shifted to 3D animation when computers allowed it.
Cool. So my first question is, where are you from and how was it growing up?
I'm from New York. I was born in Brooklyn, and when I was 1 year old, my parents moved me to South Carolina to live with my father's parents, while my parents got their act together in New York. And when I was 4, they moved me back, and he had bought a house on Long Island, and that's the house I grew up in all the way through college.
Nice. So what about how was it growing up with your grandparents? I don't know if you remember that, you were kind of young, but what was it like growing up in New York City?
Well, it wasn't New York City. I was born in Brooklyn, which is a part of New York City, but I was 0 to 1 year old.
Okay.
And practically on my birthday, I moved out. So I have no real memories of Brooklyn. Because of that move, I guess it was drastic enough that I do remember the trip down to South Carolina. So my memory actually goes back to 1 year old, which most people don't do. So my memory of my grandparents and living with them was great. It was very rural. My grandfather had built the house we were living in himself. So there were no 90-degree angles for any of the corners or the walls or anything. And he was a farmer. So I basically hung with them through their daily chores. And my sister, my youngest sister, is 2 years older than me. I'm the youngest, and she actually did some schooling down there, like a kindergarten or something. And but when I moved back to New York, I did the kindergarten at 5 years old there. So I was only 4. So I did a year without school, then did the kindergarten at 5.
So how was Long Island when you were growing up?
Well, it was home. It was pretty much all I knew. All of my friends were there. All of my values grew out of that environment. It was great. I loved it. I kind of cherished my childhood. And, yeah, so I had good friends, lifelong friends. I say that even though I haven't seen them in a lifetime, but I feel like they're still friends. And yeah, and I think the values that my parents raised us with were good. So yeah, I think I had a healthy childhood.
So what was your relationship with art and animation growing up?
Well, as far as
draw a lot.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
Yeah, I was just asking, did you draw a lot, or what kind of things did you watch? Like, how did you get that interest in art and animation?
As far as I can remember, I was always drawing. I don't remember. I suppose when I was in South Carolina, I didn't, but everything from there, I was drawing. What it is there were 5 kids in our family. My brother, my only brother, is 9 years older than me. And so there was never any sibling rivalry there or anything. But so he was always kind of teaching me things that he knew. And one of the things he taught me was how to draw cars because he loved cars. And he said cars are good. They have straight lines, they have curves, they have the facilities you need to draw. So okay, I was growing up drawing cars, and I started copying things out of magazines. I started copying realistic figures out of magazines, and it just kind of developed as I grew. So drawing was something I've always done.
Did you were you kind of animated movie, comic book? What kind of was your thing when you were little?
When I was drawing, it was mostly copying magazines and copying cars. I didn't really learn to draw what was on my mind that didn't exist out there until college, really.
Okay.
Um, when I was in the fifth grade is when animation was introduced to me.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up watching the cartoons. I loved Saturday morning because that's when the cartoons were airing at back then. You couldn't get them any other time. And my brother and I loved laughing and joking and making things up. And one time he said, that's what you should do. We were watching The Great Piggy Bank Robbery. I actually remember the cartoon. That was a Bob Clampett directed short. And we were laughing so hard with it. Out of the laugh, he said, "You should do that." And I looked at the TV and said, "Do what?" He said, "Those cartoons. You should make cartoons." He said, "You can draw. You have a good imagination. You like to laugh. You should be a." He's called it a commercial artist because he didn't know the term animator, but essentially he was saying you should be an animator. And I looked back at the screen and said, "Yeah." And the funny thing is, it stuck. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I went through the usual things of wanting to be a fireman or an astronaut or those kinds of things. One thing actually threatened it. When I got to high school, I took up mechanical drawing, and the for 4 years you have 3 years of mechanical drawing, and then high school for me was 9 through 12, so it was a 4 year thing. They introduced junior high while I was already committed to the 4 year term.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know junior high. And anyway, the fourth year is architecture. And I
Mm-hmm.
liked it. I discovered Frank Lloyd Wright. I liked creating spaces, um, and using the mechanical tools, the drafting tools, the T squares, and all of that. It's like this is pretty cool. But then I found out that to be an architect, you have to be good at math to determine stresses and proportions and ratios and weight weight tolerances and all of that. And I said, ugh. I said, let me stick to animation. And then I got into SVA, into the School of Visual Arts in Manhattan, is where I went to school. And all of a sudden, I had to calculate camera, slowing in the camera moves and slowing out of camera moves, and had to deal with proportions and fields and ratios. I was like, I was trying to avoid this math. You can't avoid math, so you may as well be good at it.
Yeah.
And I'm not good at it, but I will do as I say, not as I do. Be good at math, and life will be a lot easier for you. You know?
So, going to SVA and getting the opportunity to live in Manhattan, did you like discover anything living in Manhattan, or did you get to explore?
Well, I'm being on Long Island. I'm close enough to Manhattan that I actually commuted. I didn't relocate to go to
Okay.
school. It was strange. We didn't have a lot of money, but commuting to school, I would take the bus and the subway, and it was the cheapest way to get from Long Island to into Manhattan, and it took about a 2.5 hour journey.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I would spend 5 hours each day in transit, and sometimes I had a 3 hour class. So I was spending like 5 hours traveling for a 3 hour class, and it seemed kind of something's wrong here. Remote learning was non-existent,
Hmm.
and um, but going to Manhattan was great. When we grew up in grade school, we would take an annual trip for different. We call them field trips, and we go to different vacation, not vacation, but different educational points in history. Like we went to Mount Vernon, where George Washington was and lived, and we go to the Museum of Modern Art or to the Museum of Natural History, to the planetarium. And whenever the trip included going to Manhattan, it was an exciting time because that was the big city. That was
Hmm.
the Oz on the other side of the poppy fields.
Hmm.
And so we went there, and it was you see people walking, and it seemed like millions of people walking in the streets, and buildings 70 stories tall, and everything was concrete and paved over. it was really an abstract uh, venture going
Hmm.
to Manhattan, but it was so full of life and so full of energy. So, so yeah, for me to be able to go to school there, which means more than once a year, I was able to go every day and actually come as close as I could to living Manhattan, as opposed to living on Long Island, which is where I did grow up. I I cherished it. You know, I mean, you run into incidents, you run into different conflicts as you go, but
Hmm.
you were I was more alive because of Manhattan than I ever was on Long Island.
Hmm. So were your parents supportive of you going into art?
Yeah, they were. In fact, everyone was. People, friends of my brothers and sisters would bring pads, drawing pads by for me to draw on. They would ask me to draw things and encourage me to draw and ask to see what I had drawn. And so, yeah, it was a very positive environment that pretty much promoted me to continue to draw. My father actually wanted me to go into something that he understood as more stable, like going to the art department of some advertising firm or something like that. But when I said animation, that was too bizarre for him. He had never heard of it the way I had never heard of it. And
Hmm.
but he never tried. They never tried to stop me. It was just tried to edge me into something that they did understand. But yeah, but still, so in a supportive way. It wasn't like they were saying, "Don't do that."
Yeah.
I was allowed to find it on my own.
Hmm. So this is the part where I list out a lot of your projects. I'm not going to list everything. I'm going to list a lot. So the point is that we get to know that a Black person worked on something that we watched. So, and feel free at the end to correct me because sometimes your IMDb is wrong, but I'll just start listing. So Bedknobs and Broomsticks, Super Friends, Space Stars, Trollkins, The Smurfs, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, She-Ra, Princess Power, Brave Star, Garfield, Happily Ever After, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, The California Raisin Show, The Prince and the Pauper, The Chipmunks Rocking Through the Decades, Beauty and the Beast, Yakety Yak, Take It Back, Bebe's Kids, Cats Don't Dance, The Iron Giant, Osmosis Jones, Tom and Jerry, Lunatics Unleashed, Charlotte's Web, Hotel Transylvania, Blade Runner 2049, SpongeBob SquarePants. A couple of video games that I saw was Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets and Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. And then there's many, 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 many more.
Well, there were a few there that I didn't work on.
Okay.
Something about in the very beginning, you said Trollkin, and I think the second thing you mentioned. Could you go back and look at the
Super Friends?
no Super Friends, yeah, but there was some witch or something. Uh,
Bedknobs and Broomsticks?
Bed Knobs, yeah, I don't remember anything with that,
Okay.
so that's not there. And
All
there
right.
are some things that is not in IMDb. I
Mm-hmm.
contacted them to ask them to put me in IMDb, and this happened before, and I've called them, they've complied. But this one, they still haven't done it. But I was the animation director on the second season of the Clone Wars, the TV series, the one that Lucas did, the CGI one.
Mm-hmm.
And that does not show up on IMDb, and I've contacted them 2 times. They're supposed to validate the what is it? They're supposed to go into it and check with the authorities that be
Yeah.
confirm it, and yet it still hasn't shown up, and I don't know what the deal is there. But that
Yeah.
was because that was a big deal for
Yeah. Nice. Okay, we'll mention that later. Um, so what was uh well with let's go into like Cast on Dance. Did you use like rotoscoping or did you use your own talents to animate? Because what character did you animate?
me. Which show are you mentioning?
Cats Don't Dance.
And Cats Don't Dance. Yeah, I was the lead animator on Sawyer, the female cat, and it was all hand drawn. And
Mm-hmm.
Cats Don't Dance was wonderful. Mark Dindal directed it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, One of the best directors out there, and a good guy. It just made we were like a family. The team of not Mark and I, but the animation, the
Yeah.
entire crew was like a family. And but yeah, Sawyer was Cats Don't Dance was fun because it was our chance to become cartoony.
Mm-hmm.
Most animation had become somewhat superhero-ish, realistic type, and it was rare that you could get something that you could stretch and pull and just get zany with.
Yeah.
Cats Don't Dance offered that. And with me, though, Sawyer was, other than Max, was the most stoic character on the screen. So she didn't do any of that zany stuff that everyone around us was doing. So there were four people on my crew. There was Steve Garcia, there was Lauren Faust, and Gavin Dell. Three people. There was a four-person crew. And a little bit of help from John Hooper as well. And we were into Sawyer. And in animating a female character, is actually more difficult than a male character because everything that makes them feminine is subtle.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas everything that makes a male character male, it seems to be broad.
Mm-hmm.
So the little ways you drew the eyes, the little moves meant more than you thought they did. The pose you put her in
Mm-hmm.
had to be kind of just right, or it would break the pose, or it would mean something else. And so we had our own little mentality in our group, and that was our home, and we kind of nested ourselves in there to create Sawyer and her performance.
And did you work on the Paula Abdul video Opposites Attract?
Yes, I was on the Opposites Attract. Mike Patterson was the director of that, and that was my introduction to him.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the entire video was done through freelancers. And so they were scrounging around trying to pull up animators and giving them shots. And I was excited to be on it. So I did, and I pulled a few in people. I think Ron Myrick was brought in onto the project,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, that was an exciting one to be. And I was actually the sequel to it was called Scat Strut.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it was it wasn't accentuating Paula Abdul. It was the musicians that made the music behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually was more the lead animator on that, working with Mark.
Nice.
I'm
Uh,
saying Mike Patterson. I said Mark. So
so what was your biggest breakthrough in your career, or was there multiple?
there were multiple.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the biggest thing that comes to mind was going to SVA. So before it was a career,
Mm-hmm.
learning to draw something that didn't exist was scary for me. I had never done it before, but once I started and I took to it, it was like, oh wow, that was a big moment to see that I was self sufficient. You know, I didn't need it out there to draw it there.
Yeah.
Another breakthrough was the first moving to California. I really never came out of any room other than my bedroom that I grew up in all that time. And going to California was really my first time out of New York, other than the annual trips we took to see my grandparents, the
Mm-hmm.
family I took. So that was a big deal because one of the things I always thought I was more of a universal person than a New Yorker or a man or a black person. I always felt like I was a citizen of the world,
Mm-hmm.
but yet I was someone that had never been in any other bedroom than my own for 21 years of my life type thing.
Mm-hmm.
When I went to California, it was a chance to see how I worked in a culture other than the New York culture I grew up in. And that was an experience. I didn't take to LA at first very well. It was the pace was too different. I was used
Mm,
to Manhattan and New York, and so I found a job in San Francisco, and that was the Plague Dogs. It was the second animated feature by Martin Rosen. The first one was Watership Down, and the
mm-hmm,
name his studio was called Nepenthe. It was in San Francisco. I applied, took my portfolio up. They accepted me, but not as an animator because back then you didn't really start as an animator. You kind of started as an assistant,
mm-hmm,
worked your way up. And so I was an assistant, but I pretty much immediately started animating in a freelance way while still in LA. But like I said, a year and a half after moving to LA, I moved to San Francisco, and there I was an assistant animator on the Plague Dogs. And but I loved San Francisco. Once again, people were walking, not like LA where everyone drove. You communicate with people differently when you're face to face with them.
yeah.
You say hi, things like that. And I really I love the look of the geography of it. The environment of San Francisco was really cool. It's kind of chilly in the summer, but that's a minor issue, And the hills were great. The
Mhm.
architecture, it was all nice. And to this day, I think San Francisco's the favorite city I've lived in or
Mhm.
have experienced.
Nice. So you went from, the first 21 years of your life being in that one bedroom, and then you literally became a citizen of the world because you have lived in so many countries, like Singapore, Taiwan, Canada, Australia, Philippines, England, any more?
Ooh, you named them all. No, that
I was
was
like, ooh. So, like, what was your experience becoming a citizen of the world? Like, what was your experience living in all these various countries?
well. It goes back to your first question, which I only partially answered. Is like, what were some of the milestone moments in my life? Each one of those trips kind of presented different ones, but the biggest one for me was going to Taiwan.
Mhm,
That's where I was the or the overseas animation director on Bebe's Kids that
mhm,
Bruce Smith directed, and another wonderful person, wonderful director, wonderful animator, just all around, a stellar guy. And so for him, I was the overseas animation director. And there in Taiwan, it was pretty eye opening because in Taiwan you're illiterate because you can't read anything there. You you can't speak. You can't understand anything anyone's saying. They
mhm,
don't have English as a second language or anything. So
mhm,
everything's done through a translator. And that was interesting because that universal person thing came back. I didn't know how I would be received in a culture that was so alien in so many ways
mhm,
to the one I was raised in,
mhm,
and I loved it. Everybody there was great. We got the job done. We everybody grew from the experience. I met my wife there, or to be wife, who is now my ex-wife, but I met her there. She's the mother of my daughter, and it was a life-changing experience in so many ways. One being the lead of a major aspect of a project. Two was experience a culture that I always respected. The Asian cultures like China and Japan and like that. And three was learning how to organize, learning how to make sure you got the job done. So on a personal level, professional level, and internal, all levels, I could literally feel the growth happening
mhm.
that 6 month job.
I know when I lived in Korea, like something that's cool is like, Korean, it's like, okay, so they have the different levels of languages as compared to English. So, Asian languages are like a level 4, and the Romance languages are like a level 1, so they're really easy for us to learn. But even though Korean is an Asian language, it's like really easy to learn how to read. So I knew how to read. I didn't know what it was saying. So I learned the characters, but I still didn't know what it said. So that's like another crazy experience where you're like, I can read everything, but I don't know what none of it says.
That I think that's amazing. You were on your way. I mean,
Yeah,
that's got to be the first phase that everyone has to go through to get to
yeah.
the next phase of it. So,
Mhm.
good for you for being attentive enough to even try. I might commend you for that.
Yeah, so I was able to like me knowing how to read empowered me to explore Korea more. So I was able to take the bus, take the subway, look at a map, and be like, okay, this is where I'm trying to go. I can read it on on the Korean subway map or whatever, and then I can just go. And so that was powerful. And I was trying to, I know a little Korean. Like I was trying to learn the language, but the grammar is just so complicated that, and I get in my head a lot. I'm really analytical in addition to creative, so it was just like an uphill battle. But also with being in Korea, I felt like every day was an adventure because I didn't know the language. So I didn't even try to go to the dry cleaners because I was like, I don't even know how to have a conversation. Like even if I looked up how to have a conversation with the dry cleaner, like they would probably ask me some question that I didn't know because I didn't have a translator. So like I just was like, I just will never get my clothes. I'll just wash them and lay them out on the little dryer rack.
But even doing that though, you had to get some things done, and you had to find ways to
Yeah,
communicate it,
yeah,
and that must have been eye opening for you because that's animation. It's like
yeah,
you have to find a universal note in yourself in order to do that.
yeah.
So
And
I
that's
can.
how you realize like how art is a language because working at the animation studio in Korea, people automatically think since I worked at the studio that I was like fluent, and I'm like, no, like
Hmm.
they barely knew English and I barely knew Korean, but we figured it out. And my director would tell me to do something, I mean, it's art. You can speak in hand gesture, make it bigger, make it smaller, a couple colors or something like that. But it's actually very much easy. It's easier than people would think to like not know the language.
A picture is worth 1,000 words.
Yeah,
That's your way of saying that same common phrase.
yeah.
It's true. And a friend of mine from school, Tom Cito,
Hmm.
he went to some international animation convention or something. And when he came back, I think he might have still been in school because he's from SVA also. But he
Hmm.
came back and he said, it's weird. You see all of these people from all these different cultures. They're in these little pockets because their language is what unified them, and maybe even common. They knew each other,
Hmm.
but they were separated. But you could just look over there and knew exactly what cartoon they were talking about because they were doing things like this and doing takes, and it's like you understood. It's like, hey, these are my people. And so vicariously through his experience and him sharing that, I got what you just said. It's like it's a universal language, and if you can find a way to do it, you can successfully communicate on that frequency, on a drawing, visual, cartoony frequency.
So you spent a lot of time in Montreal. So like I'm from Michigan, so Canada, at least the part of Canada that I'm close to is like practically like another state. It's not even really like another country, particularly before, when you used to only need your birth certificate to go to Canada, like
Right.
to go to the club in Canada and stuff like that. So, but going to Montreal where they like speak French, like how was that experience?
Well, fortunately, Montreal is bilingual. They
Okay.
they actually learn English with, in fact, the way they say hello when you're going into a restaurant or fast food joint or something. They say bonjour, hi, which is like bonjour and hi. So they're offering you which would you rather speak, French? All right, so if you respond by saying hi, they shift and they say, "What can I do for you?" And
Mm-hmm.
you go on and you make it. But that bonjour hi is like there's another cultural revelation for me to be culturally bilingual that way. It's something America just doesn't know.
Yeah.
And like you, at least I believe you're saying you always wanted to learn Korean. I always wanted to learn a second language, whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, in being from America, Spanish was the number one language. And I did must have been 6 years in school of Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
I can't speak Spanish. I know a lot of the vocabulary, but I can't utter it.
Yeah.
In Taiwan, I tried to learn Chinese and Mandarin. And my wife was broken English. She, so you would think that would be a good thing, but it actually, she wasn't the best teacher. So
Mm-hmm.
we actually just spoke English. But our daughter, though, is bilingual because when my wife was pregnant, I said, you speak only Chinese to our child, and I'll speak English. We'll be in America, so English will win. So you guys have to stick to that.
Yeah.
And to this day, they did. And so my daughter grew up not even knowing it was a second language. This is the way you speak to mommy. This is the way you speak to daddy.
Yeah.
And she's 25 now. So success, that's that. And I think to this day, they still primarily communicate in Chinese.
Yeah.
So learning another language is something I always wanted. While I was in Montreal, I was trying to learn French, and I learned a few words. You can do a few. I can order my coffee at Starbucks and stuff, but conversation was out of it. It was all I can do this. But if something came back, it's like like that. And
Right.
so I haven't successfully learned. I even tried to learn Japanese once. There was a semester I tried that, and here life is going by, and I'm not achieving my goal of knowing a second language.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think like also what was the feeling of kind of being other in some places, maybe like Singapore and Taiwan and maybe the Philippines? Like, did you like the attention?
Uh, that's a good question actually because it is dynamic.
Mhm.
People, especially in a monogeneous society, as
Mhm.
a society that is so monogeneous, being one race of people being there, you do stand out when you go there. But I found, and that was another thing I learned in Taiwan, that you get back what you put out.
Mhm.
While you're walking up the street, people will look at you unabashedly bizarre. Like, it's like, what are you? Not who are you?
Right.
The And when you look at them and you give them a little smile, they're like, oh, and they'll smile and go back. And so it's like leave your what is it? Leave your dirty laundry in your country. Go there with a fresh mind.
Mhm.
And know that what you put out is what you're going to get back.
Mhm.
Conflicts will happen on occasion, but not because you put it out there.
Mhm.
You just kind of deal with those. But so from that, I learned to, before I go somewhere, decide that I'm going to love it, and then I'll go there predetermined to love whatever it is. So
Nice.
I'm an easy audience that way.
And then the question I was trying to think of during that pause, I forget my questions. If it's not written down, I have to forget my new questions. But yeah, so like I learned by interacting with some of the directors in Korea who are married to Korean women that yeah, sometimes your wife is the worst teacher. So when you said you couldn't learn the language from your ex-wife, like I've heard many a time where it's like they they're sometimes not the most patient.
Right. And your priority is your marriage. You know,
Yeah.
I didn't want to keep bringing a point of conflict into our marriage. So it's like, okay, forget this language thing. Let's just be us type thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even with one of my ex-boyfriends who was like Jamaican, and I really wanted because I went to school in upstate New York, so a lot of people were from New York City and a lot of them spoke patois and stuff like that. And so I've always wanted to like understand it. And I kind of started to understand it in college, but I was like, oh, speak to me and don't Americanize your accent, like speak to me in patois. But that gets annoying when you're like constantly not understanding what they're saying.
Mm,
And
mm,
so it's like, okay, I guess I'm not gonna learn patois
mm.
unless I'm like in an environment where he's talking to his friends, and I can just sit there and listen and then try to pick it up, because like just having him speak is just like, it's annoying to not be understood. So then
Right.
he just Americanizes his accent.
And that's good though, because that annoyance is what's another thing that's driving you to learn it.
Yeah,
And so how you deal with that annoyance is the determining factor. And for
yeah,
the decision was to, well, let me get with this.
yeah,
Instead of like backing out or going elsewhere or making or being annoyed or getting, a lot of people get paranoid. They feel when they don't understand what's being said, it must be something negative about them being said.
yeah,
And it's, no, no, don't bring garbage into the issue. You
yeah.
know, calm down and be enthusiastic about it.
So what did you like about places like Australia?
Uh, well, like I said, I go any place wanting to love it, but of all of the countries you named, Australia was the only one that I ran into a, a certain level of prejudice, racial prejudice, and
Mm-hmm,
even though not in the studio I was in, every pretty people there were pretty cool, but
mm-hmm,
when I would go out for lunch, just the getting served was a challenge,
mm-hmm.
and it just kind of brought back this flood of American negativity to me. And
Yeah,
so once I said, well, let's get beyond that, I found Australia to be really wonderful in a lot of ways. I was in Adelaide, not Sydney,
okay,
which is where the capital is the capital and all. But even there, it's called a big little city or a little big no a big little city because it's pretty spread out. But the attitudes and ways are like a small town. Like the supermarket will close at 5 p.m. so that the people working there can go home and have dinner. And I'm like, here, that's when you open because everybody's coming from work and need to buy things. So
yeah,
that's why it's really like a small, big little city,
yeah,
And but outside of that, it was good. We went on a wine tour there. The people I was working with were really great. I met it was somewhat international, so
mm-hmm,
you met a variety of people in the studio. And with all of these places, English was the primary language. So that
yeah.
was yeah.
So to go back to Baby's Kids, was at that time when it was being created, was it like, did it have an impact on you as a Black person to have this like film being made about kind of that Black culture?
It was huge.
Mm-hmm,
First of all, it was unique. It never really happened. Well, worked a little bit on the Gary Coleman show, uh,
mm-hmm,
but this was different. This was Robin Harris's work happening. This was directed by Bruce Smith. A Black man, had Reginald Hudlin as a producer on it and all, um, and we were trying to present a versions of Black culture. Whereas otherwise, you're just pretty much doing generic actions. So that was pretty cool. It was like the way I would pose a character, I was able to at least instruct the animators I worked with, to on how to pose a character to get that certain of ethnicity out of them.
mm-hmm,
The the rhythm of the speech. They would ask me, what does that mean? Why did he do this and not what seems obvious? And I would have to go into explaining culture and the history of things. And
yeah,
so it was really enlightening to try
mm-hmm,
to express something that I never had to express any of that before because it's just the way I was. It's just the way I grew up. But to try to communicate it to someone else
mm-hmm,
makes you have to kind of stand outside of it and say, yeah, why do you do that? And so that was eye opening, and they received it so well. They wanted it too because they saw the rap. For instance, they saw a lot of the rap coming out. Rap had just really kind of taken a strong hold,
mm-hmm.
and they were saying, why are the Black people always so angry in these rap videos? And I said, I never thought about even that. And I said, well, because a lot of it is dealing with dissatisfaction in the way we're treated in society. So you kind of put on that furrowed brow to
Yeah.
express, how you feel about it. And they were like, oh. And so they were sucking it in like a newborn babe, getting it from the horse's mouth, so to speak.
Yeah, speaking of like anger, I remember, being in Korea and one of my coworkers, I helped him get a job there. He's like half Korean, half Puerto Rican and grew up in Virginia. And sometimes we would be speaking English to each other. And my director, because they weren't fluent in English, they would be like, why are you all yelling at each other? We're like, we're talking about like flowers. Like we would be talking about the like most random thing that is not angry, but I guess when sometimes when a language is not yours, it sounds angry, or we're just loud, or English sounds louder than it actually is, or something like that. We're like, we're not arguing. We're just talking about a topic.
It's true. When I was in Taiwan, it was similar. There was Hakkanese was kind of the indigenous language of Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
Mandarin was the imported language from China when Chiang Kai-shek, took the place over.
Mm-hmm.
When you hear people speaking Hakkanese, it sounds like they're arguing. And I was trying to learn Mandarin, and they would say we would be in public places. People would say, "Listen to them. Doesn't it sound like they're arguing?" I said, "Yeah, no, they're just having a conversation." So that the movie Arrival kind of hit on it. The latest, there are two movies Arrival, one with Charlie Sheen, but the one with Amy Adams.
Mm-hmm.
That it I love that film because the premise it's based on is what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
What is the nature of a language?
Yeah.
And one person did say to me, the best way to learn a culture is to learn the language. And I think it's true. Embedded in that language is history, it's attitude, it's ambition,
Mm-hmm.
it's taboos. It's so much built in. It's not just words to convey a thought. There
Yeah.
are thoughts conveyed in words. And so that's one of the reasons I wanted to learn another language. But I mean, I feel like and piano is something else. I don't know how to play a musical instrument, and it's like
Yeah.
going by, and I don't have this stuff. But anyway, in Taiwan, I I I learned to listen with more open openness about it. I wouldn't be paranoid thinking they're talking about me.
Yeah.
I wouldn't assume that they're talking about something when I didn't know what they were talking about.
Yeah.
It teaches you to kind of just relax and let
Mm-hmm.
things happen and deal with it as it happens.
Yeah, and learning the language and learning the culture, like the parts of Korean that I did learn, you learn in America we kind of ask how are you, and sometimes that question people may or may not care what the answer is. Like that question in Korean is have you eaten today? And the history of that question is when Japan ruled Korea, you might starve. So have you eaten is like a one of those common questions that is asked. And so knowing that culture, and I would be like my first year I taught English. And so I would be at my school and get lunch. And for some reason there were like 2 or 3 times where I saw tofu and I thought it was chicken. And so I thought I would like take 3 things of tofu and I'm like, yeah, how about eat some chicken? And then I will sit down and be like, I took tofu. And then I didn't want to throw it away because like throwing away food in Korea is like taboo. And I'm like, how am I going to throw this tofu away? Because I don't want to eat this much tofu.
So you need it.
And then another question that's common in Korea is how old are you? Because their language is like honorific, where if somebody's older than you, you use this verb ending, and if somebody's younger than you, you use this verb ending. So like just like we ask your name, they ask your age so they know how to talk to you. So
Wow.
that's a big thing about like learning the culture while learning the language.
But look at what you just said. In America, asking a person their age, traditionally a woman their age is rude.
Yeah.
They are, it's actually polite to ask, and they probably don't have the same stigma with age because of it.
Yeah.
You know, when I what was it? You were saying, you know, when I was learning to speak. In wait a minute, I'm losing my point. when I was like watching the movie Arrival,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember another movie with Leonardo DiCaprio. I forgot the name of it, but he was like a spy in
Mm-hmm.
the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things he said to the one of the, the agents over there was that he learned their language. It was I forgot the name of it. Starts with a J. I forgot the name of it.
Mm-hmm.
He said, "You learned our language," and DiCaprio said, "Yeah." He said, "Then we're brothers." Because and it told me how much that culture believed in their language. And
Yeah.
when you saw Arrival, when she learned their language, she also gained the ability to transcend time. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I just thought that was a brilliant way to make that point. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you hear if America sounds like people are arguing, I never heard that take on from someone non-English,
Mm-hmm.
but it sound like we're arguing. That's that's interesting to me. This is the first time I heard that.
Yeah.
It makes me kind of try to sit back and look at it from their point of view. Like,
Yeah.
what is that?
Yeah, like going to a foreign country, it kind of opens your eyes. Like I remember when I was learning the alphabet in Korean, and I'm just like, why do they have silent letters? That's stupid. Why would you have a letter that you can't use? And I'm like, oh, knife written like nat. Like we have silent letters too. So
Oh, yeah.
you gain that perspective of like, oh, there's like stuff that doesn't make sense that we do. Why are you mad when they do it too?
That's right. And English is a compilation of so many languages, just
Yeah.
like Japanese is. So the rules from some of those languages is kind of vestiges of it kind of just linger, like the silent P in psychology, all of those things just kind of linger. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the idea of manners, like when I was in Korea, I'm like, oh, manners are just some Western invention. And like, cause I'm in the East now. And so when I was in Korea, I would like slurp and like chew with my mouth open sometimes. Cause I'm like, hey, I'm free here. But I gotta remember when I go back to America to chew with my mouth closed. Like the idea of manners, like that's not an Eastern invention. So you can't go from that point when you're looking at them eat or enjoy food or anything. Like when you see people like spitting on manners does not exist in the same way
Right.
in Asia. So you
Right.
can't use that viewpoint or lens.
Yeah, one person, I went to Japan for one of my trips, just a 3-day visit to
Mm-hmm.
Japan. And we had went to this noodle shop and people were slurping their soup.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went back, finally made my way back to the U.S., this was during Bebe's Kids. I told people about them slurping their soup in public. You hear all these slurps all over the place. And he said, "Well," and I said, "The louder you slurp, the more you honor the chef." And a friend of one of the animators said, "Well, why is that?" I said, "Because it's really hot. And when you're slurping food, the sucking in of air is cooling the
Yeah.
food. So
Mm-hmm.
if it tastes so good that you're willing to put yourself through that, to have to slurp that loud, the chef is feeling like, yeah, baby, I got it. They're mine. And look at it. Those are just all cultural differences. You wouldn't
Yeah.
slurp in the US.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But Asia does know. I don't understand how they serve their soup so hot. It's like, what are y'all doing back there where this is so hot? Like, it never gets that hot in America. I don't understand what they be doing.
No, no, no. You do understand. It's like it's killing off bacteria and stuff. So hotter is safer.
Yeah, but it's just like our soups aren't that hot. I guess because of we're so litigious, probably. But
Yeah. And
how
we have
hot
other
is it?
standards.
Yeah,
It's like the FDA has said our food is safe to a certain point.
yeah,
They may not have those same standards, so they
right.
boil it until it's good.
So, I consider like all animation to be tedious. This is my thing. Like all animation is tedious. Like what tediousness do you like? So you've been in multiple like different mediums of animation. Like how how is the different types of animation that you've done different, like from traditional animation, because you've done 3D and visual effects and all this stuff? Did you stay relevant?
Uh, you broke up a little bit there, so let me say the question back. Animation is tedious. How, and I've dealt with different mediums of animation.
Mhm.
How do I deal with the tedium? Oh, what is the distinction of the tedium between them, and how do I stay relevant? Is that what you
Yeah,
said?
because you've done traditional animation, you've done 3D animation, you have done visual effects and stuff, right?
Not really. I'm
Okay.
minor. I'm not a visual effects artist.
Okay. So what's the difference between, let's say, traditional animation and 3D animation for you?
It's, the way I sum it up is traditional hand drawn animation, I call an additive process, meaning nothing's going to happen if you don't put it down. If you want the character to shake their head, you have to draw this drawing, you have to draw that drawing, and you have to draw all of the drawings in between at a certain distance to get that timing to be that. So when you
Mhm.
look at Carl do this, that kind of head shake, there
Yeah.
was attentive effort to intentionally put all of that in there. Very few happy accidents happen uh, in that line. But in CG, your pencil is a computer. So your pencil has a brain of its own, and it's doing all of this stuff. So when you put this drawing here and this drawing there, the computer does the in-betweens automatically. It's up to you to curve how it times to do that in between.
Hmm.
So I see CG animation as a subtractive process. It's almost like trying to wrestle that computer into control, saying, no, I want you to do it this way.
Yeah.
One of the distinctions that makes a good animator in traditional animation is how willing they are to do those very expressive drawings. Because if you do it and it doesn't work, now you have to find one that finally does work, and it's a struggle. So those people whose draftsmanship is is confident, those who are confident enough in their draftsmanship and have the prowess to really make some nice drawings, they can become more top tier animators.
Yeah.
If you're somewhat stoic in your drawing, you won't dare to go where other people can go. But
Hmm.
computers, it's almost like who is willing to wrestle that computer with that computer, because the drawing is there. You just have to do a nicer pose. The architecture of the character is built in. It's like on a blank page when you're drawing, you have to create,
Yeah.
not there. But you have the model in computer. You simply have to shape it to what you want it to be, the
Mhm.
pose. So once again, it's a collaboration between you and your pencil, or you and the brain of that computer. Whereas even though it's a collaboration in 2D as well, it's more like allowing yourself to just let it happen, and the hand will follow and the pencil will follow. In computer, you put something out there, the computer says, "You mean this?" And you're like, "No, no, no, like this." And it's like, "Oh, okay." And then you're constantly like shaping it, pulling it into being that precise performance you want it to be. So
Yeah.
that's how I would, in a very broad way, distinguish the difference between 2D and CG.
Yeah, because because I go by BlkWmnAnimator, but I'm actually a 3D modeler. So when I was in school, I only had to take one 2D animation class, and I put it off as long as possible, and then I'd be through it because like the tediousness of 2D animation is not my ministry. Like I'm like, I do not want to draw all these drawings. Like,
Mhm.
and so and then something that came to my mind in the past week, because I'm like a teacher and always trying to I do speaking, so I'm always trying to think of how to make the idea of animation simple for when I speak to like audiences. And something that I thought of in the past week is like traditional 2D animators are like, as compared to 3D, they're like the modeler and the animator, because they're creating, like when I talk about my specialty of modeling, I tell people the program starts empty, and you have to create everything in there. But then you add, like once you get to the animation part, it's already there, so you're not creating anything. But like, so 2D traditional people are like the modeler and the animator if you think of it in the 3D aspect.
Yeah,
And
it's
the
true.
texture artist. Well, the color people are probably more the texture artists, but yeah.
No, but you're right though. It's like the blank page is a scary thing, you
Hmm.
know, because nothing exists there, and you know the wonders that can exist there if you only had the skill to do it. And 2D or people have so many ways of approaching it. Some people say it's already there, you just reveal it, or
Mm,
you say it's already in your mind, just release it and let your hand find it. You know, and then other people are more work intensive. It's like put something down and then correct it. You know,
yeah.
sometimes when I'm sitting and looking at a blank page and not knowing what to draw, I'll just do a little squiggle because once you do that, you say, no, no, that's not right. It should be here and like that. So once you start,
Yeah.
it kind of happens. So don't let that anxiety keep you from it. You can't run away. You have to run towards it. And that's the way a blank page is, I think. You can't let it intimidate you to say, oh, I'm backing away. You have to kind of attack
Hmm.
it. There are so many artists in the past have found different ways
Hmm.
of getting through that moment. And one of the ways I do is just to put something down and then start correcting it. You know, so you just start and it kind of flows from there. You'll start to correct yourself. You'll start to discover yourself in the doing of it.
So you worked in video games as well. How is video games different from like TV film?
Ah, that was another learning experience. I was the animation director on the first Harry Potter game, and the first Harry Potter game was the Chamber of Secrets. I don't know that they ever did. You mentioned Sorcerer's Apprentice, and I don't know that they ever actually made a game out of that. But I'm pretty sure they made a game out of the following
Mm-hmm.
uh, episodes. But that was cool. That was in England. I went over to Chertsey, England, which is like 15 miles outside of London.
Mm-hmm.
Electronic Arts had this beautiful Robert Graves. His last name was Graves. Robert Graves architecture there, and it was on a lake with swans around it. It was really
Mm-hmm.
impressive, and um, and I had never worked in games before, so it was a whole different animal. And one of the things you learn when you go to a different studio is whoever the head of that studio is, whatever their experience was with animation, tends to be what rules that studio. Like if that person came from layout, they then layout kind of rules. If that person was an animator and or a technician, whatever. Well, with games, you quickly learn that the AI people rule that game. Nothing can happen if they can't get it to happen. Because it's up to the AI to know that if this is a ball, and get my hand in the screen, and you want the character to pick it up, the AI has to be good enough to say the hand is over the ball, it goes down, it goes here, not through, and goes here. And when it lifts, the ball goes up. If the AI can't do it, you could do something like this, and the ball it doesn't work. So you really have to collaborate and send everything through the programmers to say, can I do this? I want to do this. Can I do that? And one of the goals I had with games, the reason that they wanted me not coming from games is because they were coming out with the PlayStation 2, which was
Mm-hmm.
twice as powerful as the PlayStation 1. It was the most powerful game platform coming out, and they wanted to take advantage of that with more feature-like quality in their animation. So I think they made the right decision to go for someone who had feature animation experience. And in doing that, one of the things I wanted to achieve was better transitions between the moves.
Mm-hmm.
Because all the games you see, they just kind of turn and they run, or they when they fight, it's and then it stops. And I said, can't we get some anticipation? But no, you can. If you press that button, the players are the audience. And
Mm.
their happiness is what it's all about. Just like with us, the moviegoer is our audience.
Yeah.
And if they press that button and that character doesn't go and hit, if you press that button, the character goes like that, the other player or character is not there anymore, and it's just a dissatisfying experience.
Yeah.
And So you learn these priorities, and you, just like with the languages we talked about, you accept them as what they are, and
Yeah.
instead of fighting it, you know.
Yeah.
And so I had to come up with different ways of getting anticipation in there without compromising the response time in it. And one of the ways was, for instance, drag. Like, you want a character to hit, let them punch. But then when they do punch, the head kind of goes back. So it's like, so it feels like there is some uh, anatomical, architectural manipulation going on, not
Yeah.
just a stiff thing. And after they hit, can you then drag out of it? Can you make the head go back? You know, can you, another way to feel like anticipation is to give it a curve. Like, instead of punching straight, you kind of dump down, and it feels like an anticipation to come up into,
Yeah.
or to go up and down. You know, little things like that help soften the transitions between moves. So I was trying to bring my traditional feel for animation into a medium that really didn't have a place for it. And so you had to use your imagination and collaborative skills with other departments to try to achieve some of those satisfactions. I would say I got about half of what I wanted to achieve out of it, being someone that wasn't necessarily a gamer. Um, I think we did pretty well in that. I think it's a satisfying game to play
Yeah.
because the things we achieved in it.
Uh, so as a veteran in the animation industry, have you decided what your purpose is in regards to blackness and like mentoring black professionals in animation?
Good question again. Yeah, well, first of all, just me being here is a big deal. You know, just so without me even trying, it's kind of built in.
Yeah.
Uh, Outside of blackness, I've decided that my purpose, in one word, is growth. Is somehow I want people experiencing my work to come out a little bit better for it, even if it's a non-consequential shot of a hand lifting off a table. I want them to come out of there saying, "Oh, there's some insight there. I
Mm-hmm.
never thought of that when I lifted my hand off the table." You know, well, that same thing goes in an expanded way when it comes to blackness. I'm almost always the only black person in the studio, much less the only black animator. You know, down to the receptionist. Sometimes I'm the only one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so in that way, I see myself kind of as an ambassador of Black people, and just trying to be a good person, trying to be a fair person. Um, you know, I feel I'm doing my race as much good as I can in that way.
Mm-hmm.
I've never really been one to preach Blackness specifically, but I've
Mm-hmm.
never been one to shy away from it. I'm not there's no denial here. And in fact, there's only pride here for it. I just don't boast on it, you
Mm-hmm.
know? Um, so, and whenever I am in a situation where there are other Black people, whenever I'm in a position to hire, um, I do my best to try to bring a Black person on board just so they have the opportunity to move to the next level.
Yeah.
So that is that. I guess the brotherhood of it is what I try to respect whenever the opportunity arises. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been so um, what is it capable as some other people, as like you, who started this interview process to get the word out there.
Mm-hmm.
It's very that's very institutional of you. That's very, I can't find the right word, but you're stepping forward with it.
Mm-hmm.
I've always kind of been immersed in the medium less so than to step out and try to make that happen. But at the same time, when it is asked, I try to be there for it. I don't know if that's a dissatisfactory answer or not. But.
I feel like in your citizen of the world journey, like you have even if it's not on purpose, represented Blackness. So, I mean, even if it's like a very purposeful thing in your mind, you're still doing it, like you said.
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit. Yeah, I try to at least do that. And if the opportunity comes around where I can do more, I try to step up and do more.
Yeah. So last question. If someone was producing a documentary about you, what things would you want them to highlight about your life outside of your work in animation?
Well, a few things. One is my daughter. We're kindred spirits in a way, and I love the hell out of her. And how I parent her is really how I parented her is really no different than any other way I handle my life. The way I work in the studio is the same. When I taught animation at Laguna College of Art and Design for 2 years, and the way I dealt with those students is the same way I raised my daughter. There was no difference. So once again, it kind of goes back to that universal thing. It's like be sincere, have integrity for who you are, and everything else will hopefully just fall in place. And if it doesn't, so be it. That doesn't make you compromise that sincerity or that integrity. So if a documentary were made about me outside of animation, what I wanted to say, it would what I would want it to reflect, I would think would be yeah, is being being somewhat irreverent, meaning it gives you something of an opinion about things.
Mm-hmm.
Being irreverent enough to not just accept without asking. It's like, do you really have to do it that way? And often the answer comes back, yeah. Those often the ways of the world are tried and true. They've evolved there. They didn't just pop up there. But sometimes they're not. Sometimes there is a better way, and so a certain amount of irreverence, I think, is important. So I would want the documentary to reflect that I look at things fresh for what they are, and not necessarily accept them for what I'm told they're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. I think your documentary could be called Universal Man. And so there's this combination of like your experience in different countries, but also the idea that there's a universality to how you could apply different things, and that you use the same methods of raising your daughter as like teaching students. Like it's all interconnected.
Right.
You don't have to reinvent the wheel.
And I like that, and thank you for saying it, because I define that as philosophy. Is like a philosophy is something that works in more than one situation.
Yeah.
And the more situations, whatever it is, works in, the better the philosophy. And
Mm-hmm.
and that's the way I see what you just said.
So is there any way people can like reach out to you and contact you? I don't know if you're on social media, but
Well, I'm not a heavy social media person. I am on Facebook.
mm-hmm.
I don't have a studio, so I can't say, hey, contact me and maybe we'll have work for you. I don't have that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I am open to confer with people. I am constantly looking for work, so I'm open in that way as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, people, you can go to my site and check out my work. That's www.lennygravesAnimation.com,
And Lennie with the IE.
with an IE, not a Y, exactly. And I don't know. I guess, yeah. So in that way, they can contact me, I suppose. And I am willing to step forward as the leader, just the way you asked for the interview, and I said yes.
Mm-hmm.
In that way, I'm there for you.
Well, Lennie, I appreciate you coming on my platform. and dealing with all this technical craziness.
No problem.
And to everyone out there, I would like you to like So I Know It's Real, comment and tell me how you feel, subscribe to Seal the Deal, and sign up for post notifications to show your zeal. And I'll see you in the next video. Peace.